Recording in progress.
It is 1 o'clock, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Douglas County Planning Commission to order. First, I would like to welcome our new Planning Commission member, Paul Bruno, and ask him to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, thank you very much for the privilege of allowing me to serve on the Planning Commission. While it hasn't been my residence in the last 27 years, I have been coming to Genoa Lakes and spending time with my family for that period of time. I've seen changes, as we all have, witnessed in the valley and at the lake during that period of time. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve on the Planning Commission, this collegial board, and to work with the outstanding planning staff to keep Douglas County the wonderful place that it has been for all of my experience. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Paul. David, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Pledge to our flag and our Constitution. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If there are no objections from any of the commissioners, I will lead this meeting until after we elect new officers. For right now, I will open the meeting for public comment. Will you please direct your comments towards items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Planning Commission, and hold your comments on agenda items until they are considered by the Planning Commission. If you are disruptive or disrespectful to commissioners, staff, or members of the public, you will be asked to stop speaking and to sit down. When you rise, please write your name on the list and hold your comments to 3 minutes. Ellie.
Good afternoon. Ellie Waller for the record. Welcome, Planning Commissioner Bruno. You are seated with a wonderful variety of people that make this a well-rounded Planning Commission. I believe in March or sometime thereafter, you will all be requested to provide a recommendation on the vacation home rental policy. As a board, very similar to that advisory board in a recommending position. I'm hoping you will read, right now it sits at about 25 pages as redlined. It might be 1 or 2 more or less. I'm hoping that you're not going to try to change a lot of the proposed amendments. I've sat through every meeting in some capacity in written comment, on Zoom, or in person, mostly in person. This arduous and sometimes very painful task of finding consensus, as you all know, is a little smaller board than yours, but I would appreciate the consideration when you're reading this policy. If you really are interested in proposing changes to those amendments, come as a citizen to the February 22nd meeting. It's pretty much going to be ready for your review. But that is my strongest urging, that you take a look at this and allow the process to move forward. There will be more rounds of amendments, I'm sure, in the future. We've been through one legal challenge. We've cleaned it up with that. I think it's very important to take in consideration the time and effort that has gone into that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Is there any more public comment? Seeing no one rise, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. At this time, we will move to election of chair and vice chair for possible action. Discussion on election of the chair and vice chair in compliance with Chapter 2.06 of Douglas County Code and Section 2.1 of the Planning Commission bylaws. Is there a discussion at the commission?
Madam Chairman, I want to commend you, and I want to commend Mark for your excellent service to the Planning Commission in the last year. You have both done an outstanding job. I think we've been well led and well served by your attention to detail, your attention to the process that we follow, and I commend both of you. And I would be prepared to make a motion at the appropriate time after we hear public comment on both of these positions, either collectively or individually.
Further discussion? Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo Mr. Walder's comments. I think you've led us well in the last year, and appreciate both your leadership and Mark's. And again, I'll save my comments for the vote, but thank you very much.
Other comments? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chairman, I think in light of the fact that we don't have any comments or any apparent controversy, I would like to move the adoption of Maureen Casey as chair and Mark Nedenrep as vice chair.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Kirk and a second by Paul. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, and I'd like to say thank you for your confidence. Now we will move to approval of the agenda for possible action, approval of proposed agenda, and we reserve the right to take items in a different order, to combine two or more agenda items for consideration, and to remove items from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item on the agenda at any time. Is there anything the commission has comment on or would like to change? Seeing nothing, Mark, you have motion.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
Second.
Public comment? Seeing none. We have a motion by Mark, second by Bryce. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Now, approval of the minutes for possible action, discussion to approve the minutes. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
So moved.
Bryce, public comment? Discussion? Seeing none, seeing none. We have a motion by Mark, second by Bryce. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Public hearings for presentation only. Presentation by Douglas County Community Development Department staff on land use, planning, and development applications and the role of Douglas County Community Development staff, Planning Commission, and Board of County Commissioners in each. Kate Marolis O'Neill, Principal Planner, presenting.
Good afternoon. I'm just waiting to see how I get up there. Thanks, Lucille. Well, good afternoon, everybody. First, I do want to congratulate newly appointed member, Mr. Bruno, and the reappointment of Madam Chair, Mrs. Casey, and Mr. Nedenreep. And thank you to all of you for your time today while we do a presentation and an overview of planning, land use, and processes. Okay. Please hold. Anybody have a good joke? No.
Do we have the link? Do we have the link for?
Said you share it like you share it like Zoom.
Do you have the link? On here?
So I thought, he said.
Zoom
go off
didn't get
that.
logged, we didn't get logged into Zoom.
I've never logged into Zoom before.
So we log into sign in right there in the upper right.
Right here?
T Delaire.
It's like, wait, you forgot the D, Tom. T. Oh,
Looks like he's got.
he's going to sign. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Too many Douglas MB. Who's on first? Okay, delete and N. Delete N. Move it over. N. There you go. Okay, password. How many people does it take to put in a light bulb?
Ken, were you able to get on the Wi-Fi? Okay.
Oh, you forgot here is wrong. Go back up. T. Delaire at Douglas MB.
Let the eyeball. What did I do wrong? Oh, there's at the very end. There's another two. Why isn't this thing working? Two. Douglas MB.us. Okay. Yeah, you can turn the microphone off. This.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I think we are ready now. So here we go. So I want to begin first with a few quotes from the American Planning Association that summarizes our role in planning and how important it is for our communities. First, the goal of planning is to maximize the health and economic well-being of residents in ways that reflect the unique needs, desire, and culture of those who live and work within the community. Also, cities and counties need to consider what can and should happen to a community, how it should grow and change, and what it should offer residents 10, 15, or even 20 years into the future. Planning establishes goals and policies for directing and managing the future growth and development of a community or region. So one of the most important things I think in planning is proper planning, because it's important and it shows us how it helps us improve our community and its members. And how do we accomplish this? How do we accomplish proper planning? Let's take a look at some key components to proper planning. First, develop a common vision. This will increase buy-in and effectiveness of plans and save money by avoiding duplication, sizing facilities properly, and promoting efficient and cost-effective investments. Secondly, create a sense of place and reinforce sense of community by incorporating architectural, environmental, and aesthetic elements as part of the planning to connect people to their community. Proper planning also protects and enhances property values. How do we do this? Well, by enhancing property values with community plans for parks and trails and playgrounds, transit, and other amenities. In relation to planning for parks and trails, this directly relates to how planning safeguards for public health and safety. Planning provides opportunities with access to physical activity and healthy foods. Public safety is protected with strong building codes and other regulations to prevent fire or flooding, as well as designing buildings, parking lots, streets, and neighborhoods to reduce opportunities for crime. Proper planning also provides public facilities and infrastructure by preparing communities to meet future demands for public services and facilities, such as water and sewer systems, roads and transit lines, fire and police stations, schools, parks, and libraries. Proper planning also improves economic development. Well-planned communities offer residents and businesses a range of convenient and affordable choices. Protect the environment and conserve resources by identifying important natural and cultural resources, conserve these resources, and protect the environment. Lastly, proper planning needs to set clear expectations for all. Those involved in the process, landowners, boards, commissioners, county staff reviewing application in order to help and minimize any conflict. As part of any land use in Nevada and being members of the Planning Commission, you are familiar with our master plan, which was updated in 2020. We're going to take a closer look at what the master plan is and why it is important. First, NRS requires a master plan to be created when a planning commission has been established. Secondly, official public document is first prepared and adopted by the Planning Commission and then adopted by the governing body. Long-term general plan for physical development of the county, which is typically looking 10 to 20 years into the future when we're talking about the master plan. The master plan also identifies current issues and needs in the community. It also is general and summarizes goals, but does not indicate detailed regulations. We see this more specific or detailed regulations in our county development code. The master plan also includes actions to achieve the goals. This is seen in the implementation part of the master plan. What are the actions? How do we get there and accomplish each goal? We provided you with the implementation section of the master plan today to reflect on as you discuss your priorities and goals for the year. Now that we see what the master plan is and why it is so important, let's look at how we implement the plan. First and foremost, it starts with our development code and zoning land for uses. Historically, zoning is a separation of a community into zones that regulate land uses and the intensity of the development. Secondly, the goal of zoning is to ensure that neighboring land uses are compatible. In Douglas County Code, Title 20, as refer to it, is the consolidated development code that regulates development. Before approving or denying any project, local officials must determine whether the project complies with the provisions of Title 20. We see here some of those provisions from our development code we look at when determining the validity of a project, from zoning and land division to floodplain regulations, growth management, as well as processes for applications for planning, engineers, and building permits. Next, who does what in the planning process? It begins with our Community Development Department staff. We are responsible for day-to-day implementation of the master plan and Title 20 of the Douglas County Development Code. We review development applications per the master plan and code. We are responsible for providing a high level of customer support, track and issue building and zoning permits, review plans, and respond to development questions on a daily basis. We prepare public noticing for hearings. We provide technical advice to Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners during public hearings. Administratively, we hear minor development applications as allowed by code, examples being a design review, minor variance, and parcel maps. This slide is an important one regarding our advisory bodies in Douglas County, which are the Town of Genoa, the Town of Minden, and the Town of Gardnerville. Per the Douglas County Code 20.08, all zoning permits and tentative parcel maps and subdivision maps within town boundaries must be reviewed by the town prior to final action. Exceptions for this would be sign reviews, temporary permits, and surveys. Secondly, no final action shall be taken until a formal written recommendation has been received by the director or hearing body. Failure of advisory body to make a recommendation may not operate to deprive an applicant of statutory rights. There are timelines that are set by NRS and for some of these items to be heard by various boards and commissions. Thirdly, actions by an advisory body are evidence to be considered by the final decision maker, staff, Planning Commission, Board of County Commissioners. The record generated by the advisory body may be considered. So evidence for staff to consider, you as the Planning Commission to consider, to Board of County Commissioners to consider. In addition, staff will add to the record evidence that is generated by one of these advisory bodies. All of you as members of the Planning Commission are a very important part of the planning process. You, as you know, are a 7-member board appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. You serve a 4-year term. It is required by NRS to be established in a county with a population over 45,000. The Planning Commission reviews amendments to the master plan, zoning map text amendments, subdivision maps, and planned unit developments, and recommends to the Board of County Commissioner. You approve special use permits, major variance requests, and variance to improvement standards. You are a recommending body, just as the towns are, so you are not the final decision maker with the exception of approvals for special permit, major variance requests, and again, the variance to improvement standards. You also hold a public hearing the second Tuesday of each month. And now to the final decision maker in the planning process, which is the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioner is vital in the planning process as they evaluate recommendations from you as the Planning Commission, staff analysis and public input, final decision maker on master plan amendment, zoning map text amendments, and subdivision maps, and hears appeals of the special use permits and variances from the Planning Commission. I have a brief flow chart here of how the process works, starting with a typical application and how it proceeds through the process. First, it's a pre-app, and we encourage customers to have a pre-app with us. It gives us an opportunity to address any issues, get kinks out to avoid the applicant from paying for filing fees or design work that may not be necessary, based on information we can share with them during a pre-application process. An application is reviewed for completeness during the first 3 days, and then it's distributed to the various departments. Next, typically a week or two after that, we have an internal projects meeting for staff to discuss projects and take notes. We then send out to the applicant to notify them of either more information needed or corrections are required prior to moving forward with the application. Ideally, the applicant will then address our comments and amend items, and if needed, we may have a subsequent meeting with the applicant to discuss our comments in more detail. Once the review is complete, staff prepares a staff report for each of the applicable advisory bodies and for the Board of County Commissioners. Staff report will either have recommendations of approval or findings and justification for denial. The report is laid out for you starting with the summary of the project, including some background on the site, images and descriptions of the zoning, the surrounding zoning, and those type of things. You will see a description of the project as well as an elevation of the project, ending with evaluation, my apologies, evaluation of the project, ending with the findings and fact. If the project is within the town of Minden, Gardnerville, or Genoa, then the project would be heard at their town board meeting, and they would make a recommendation to staff. Staff then makes a recommendation to the Planning Commission, who in turn makes a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. And again, the Board of County Commissioner makes the final decision to affirm or deny the Planning Commission recommendation. So some of the typical applications that are heard, and I've gone over these previously, so I'll skim through these. Amendment to master plan. The master plan amendment review cycle is considered twice a year. These amendments are approved by the Planning Commission and then adopted by resolution of the Board of Commissioners. Secondly, the zoning map amendment. Zoning map amendments and zoning text amendments are heard by the Planning Commission and Board in any given month. The Board adopts these amendments by ordinance after 2 readings. And a plan development overlay, which we refer to as PD. This is approval process similar to zoning map amendment. The PD overlay may be proposed as an overlay zone within any zoning district, but the use and intensity must be compatible with the base zoning and the master plan. It actually allows new development standards to be created which differ from existing zoning standards, but requires a minimum of 25% open space. So you think of really a plan development as an extra zoning layer, basically another zoning layer. Some other typical applications that are heard is a tentative parcel map. This is a land division creating up to 4 parcels. This is heard from administrative level, so it's heard by the administrative hearing panel, which is made up of staff. Secondly, subdivision map, which is a land division creating 5 or more parcels. This is heard by you as the Planning Commission and then the Board of County Commissioners. Lastly, the special use permit, specially permitted uses are those which are generally compatible with the land uses permitted by right in any given zoning district, but which require individual review of their location, design, and configuration, and the imposition of conditions to ensure the appropriateness of the use at a particular location within a given zoning district. They're usually, these are heard by you unless it's appealed. So if you are hearing a special use permit and the client or anybody appeals that decision, then that will go to the Board of Commissioners at that point. So ultimately, as I said, staff report is going to end on the findings of fact. or the evaluation of these findings by staff to determine if we feel the applicant has met the findings or they failed to meet the findings of fact. So the findings are found in the NRS, and then some are particular to Douglas County. So if you look at that red section, those are the various findings of fact. You can see the findings of fact are very important, and you want to always pay close attention to those when you're reviewing your staff reports. Lastly, I do want to add that during the March meeting, I will be doing a presentation on TRPA. I know one of the tasks I was given when I started here with the county is to better understand TRPA, their role and jurisdiction regarding code and projects and permitting. I can tell you it is an ongoing learning curve. It's a lot of information. I will have a representative with me from TRPA. I felt that would be best during that presentation because I think that staff person is going to have be more suitable for some of the questions and stuff that you might have for TRPA as far as their history and jurisdiction and so forth, so that you get the proper answers that you need at that time. On that note, that wraps up my presentation. Again, I appreciate your time today and your attention. And if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer.
Very nice, Kate. Thank you.
You're
Are there
welcome.
questions from the commission? Kirk?
Madam Chairman, yes, Kate, that was an excellent presentation. Just for the public's edification who may be watching this, TRPA is the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. And my only comment on what you expect to accomplish, Kate, is good luck on understanding TRPA.
Yeah, thank you. Godspeed to me.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Questions? Nope. You get off easy today. Wait till next month.
I'm just waiting until that meeting where you guys start firing questions at me.
Yeah, well.
Thank you, everyone.
It'll happen. It'll happen. Since that was for a presentation only, we will move to agenda item number 2. For possible action, discussion on land division application DP 22-0224, a request for a tentative subdivision map to create 48 airspace condominiums for the second phase of the Tahoe Beach Club, a residential condominium and beach club development project. The subject property is located along Beach Club Drive in the R-077 Residential-Oliver Park zoning district in the Tahoe Community Plan. APN 1318-22-310-008, 009, 010, 012, 013, and 1318-22-710-011, period. The applicant and project representative is Patrick Ramey, CEO, Beach Club Development Phase 2, LLC, period. Are there any disclosures by any of the planning commissioners? Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I failed and forgot, and I apologize. I wanted to compliment each member of this planning commission that welcomed me separately to my duties before this meeting, and thank the staff and Mr. Dallaire for also welcoming me and giving me a great primer on zoning and the other issues that we just heard from our principal planner. In the Tahoe Township, I talked about changes, and there have been changes up there as well for many years. This item on the agenda could have been brought at any time, but it's in my first meeting, and I apologize to my commissioners that it appeared on this first meeting. Let me explain. It has with it some necessary disclosures that I will make now. First, I reside in a condominium in the Tahoe Beach Club development. Bought it in 2016. Second, I received a notice from the county, which means that my property indeed could be and is directly affected by this application. Third, I am a board member of the HOA, the Homeowners Association, that has jurisdiction over the common areas in the entire development once it is turned over to the residents. This includes the areas around the buildings subject to this application. As reflected in the engineering conditions, the HOA is responsible, at least in part, to, quote, maintain drainage facilities and easements, close quote, including on property which is the subject of this application. That, in my opinion, may create a direct pecuniary interest to an organization where I am a decision maker. Thus, in my analysis, there are two reasons. One, the pecuniary interest, which some may argue is de minimis and it doesn't matter. But two, I'm a decision maker with respect to the various issues that are coming before this commission. The HOA board must need to accept this requirement to maintain for the common area covered by this application. So that's a direct decision that I would otherwise have to make. So finally, in view of these disclosed facts, in accordance with Nevada Revised Statutes 281A.240 and 281A.139, I paid attention in that ethics course, this Planning Commission bylaws as well affect this decision at Section 4. I must therefore recuse myself from consideration of this application, and I apologize to my fellow members of the commission to have to do this in my first meeting, and I request permission to the chair that I depart.
You don't have to apologize. Not your fault. I didn't schedule it. Tom did. So lift yourself up, go in the back room, shut the door, and we'll carry on without you. And you can definitely tell you're an attorney.
Thank you.
Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to agenda item number 2, I wish to disclose that my firm has had business dealings with the Beach Club in the past. However, I do not believe it is a conflict and it will not impact my decision or vote today.
Thank you, Bryce. Kirk? Nope. Anybody else? We're good to go. Does anyone need to take a break? This may be a long one. Nope. Ken? Okay, we'll take 5 minutes. All right. We'll be back at 1:40.
Recording stopped.
Okay, I'll call this meeting back to order.
Recording in progress.
Lucille, are you ready? Okay. Back to, for possible action, Tahoe Beach Club.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Lucille Rayo, Community Development. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I hope I feel the love. All right, so I think everyone's pretty familiar where Tahoe Beach Club is located, but if you're not, it's west of Highway 50 along at the terminus of Kale Drive, and the application today, the buildings are located along Beach Club Drive. It is located, the parcels are located in the R-077 residential plan area statement in the Tahoe planning area in the Oliver Park General Improvement District. A little bit of background on the project. In June 24th of 2011, Tahoe Beach Club received approval by the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency for the project. It was originally a 155-unit mobile home park, and they proposed 12 multifamily residential buildings totaling 143 units. As part of that project, there was the Kingsbury General Improvement District, which was located along the parcel at the lake, and that was removed, and they were built on a new parcel within the same subdivision. The first subdivision map to come forward was LDA 15026, and it was approved on November 10th, 2015 by the Planning Commission, and on November 15th by the Board of County Commissioners. The approval was for 12 multifamily residential parcels, one common area parcel, and then a parcel for the water treatment facility, which is also KGID. And then there was an approval, LDA 16008, a tentative subdivision map for 48 airspace condominium units on May 10th, and that was approved May 10th, 2016 by the Planning Commission, and May 19th, 2016 by the Board of County Commissioners. Shortly after that, there was a modification to LDA 16008. They wanted to include some other buildings, so we came back before the Planning Commission and the board, and that went from 48 units to 101 units, also condominium units we're talking about, and that was application LDA 17020. You have copies of all of these maps in your packet. That was approved by the Planning Commission on November 14th of 2017 and by the board on December 7th of 2017. After that, there was a modification to the parcels, and that was application, that was modifying application LDA 15026. A little bit more about the background. So the applicant has proposed 3 phases to the project. I have a phasing map as part of this presentation. We'll look at that in a minute. There's, in phase 1 is 2 buildings which are already constructed and people are living there. Parcel 1 has 25 units, parcel 2 is 21 units. Phase 2 includes parcels 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. That's part of what we're going to be discussing today, for a total of 48 residential units in 6 buildings. Phase 3 are parcels 8, 10, 11, and 12, for a total of 49 units in 6 buildings. One of the conditions, all maps have to be final prior to construction of the condominium units. This is a map of the site. You have this in your packet as well. It's packet page 61. I do have all of the rest of the map in here if we want to look at that. If you want to discuss that later on, we can go into depth on it if you need to. But just to give you, so this parcel is the Tahoe Beach Club, the clubhouse. These are the 2 buildings that are constructed. This is under construction now. And then, so this area is what we're talking about today for the condominiums. This is what the different layouts are for the condominium units. And each parcel is on a slide, which you have also. I threw in some pictures in case you haven't had an opportunity to visit Tahoe Beach Club. This is what the clubhouse looks like. It's existing, it's built, it's being used. This here is a slide of phase 1, buildings 1 and 2. And this is a simulation photo or renderings of what the following phases will look like. This is the phasing map that I talked about earlier. So we have Beach Club here, we have the two existing buildings here. This is Beach Club Drive, and then this is Phase 2, and this is Phase 3. We have received public comment. It has been added to supplemental, and we can discuss that if need be. And staff believes the findings have been met per Section 20708-030 of Douglas County Code. And, I'm sorry, that should say Planning Commission, must base their recommendations on the tentative map findings under NRS and make the findings in the affirmative to approve the condominium map. Planning Commission may recommend approval with additional conditions, or denial of the request to the Board of County Commissioners. Tentative subdivision map application DP 22-0224 for Tahoe Beach Club based on the discussion, ability to make the findings and as outlined in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions. Any questions?
Questions from the commission? Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of minor questions and some clarifications. Correct me if I'm wrong on some of these things, Lucille or Cynthia or Tom. In the title of the agenda item, it says the property is located on Beach Club Drive in the R-077 Residential Oliver Park Zoning District. I think people need to be aware that in Tahoe Township, we do not do zoning the same way we do in the Carson Valley. So R-077 is not a real land designation. It's the zoning district of Oliver Park area where it's located. We have, I think, probably more than 30 zoning districts in Tahoe, so they all have a different number, and that doesn't affect the density or anything else. Secondly, I just want to make clear to everyone that this will go to the Board of County Commissioners. We're not the final decision-making authority here, so our recommendation is to the Board of County Commissioners. It does not need to go back to TRPA. As you see in the background, TRPA considered this in 2011. And unless there's significant changes made in what TRPA approved or conditioned, it will not go back to them. And then finally, and again, if I'm mistaken on any of these, Lucille or Cynthia, please correct me. I would note in the background, it does say that this has been before the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, I believe a total of 6 times, 3 at the Planning Commission levels, 3 at the Board of County Commissioners level. And I went back to the minutes of those meetings. I saw no great controversy when any of the approvals were given. In fact, I think it was a unanimous vote at every instance before the Planning Commission and before the Board of County Commissioners. So I think those are the things that I wanted to highlight before we move on to hear from the applicant or deliberate on this issue.
Any other questions for staff? Ken?
Yes, I had a question. Steve Schneider's letter with the parking, is that have any validity of the letter?
Thank you, Mr. Paxton. For the record, Lucille Rayo, Community Development. So today we're here for the subdivision map, tentative subdivision map for the condominium units. The parking, anything related to parking has to do with design review. So that would have been reviewed, approved, or denied, or appealed at the time that the design review came forward. So, parking is not part of this approval or denial. But we certainly can discuss it if you want to. Can I make one other comment? Kirk, you're correct about TRPA as far as approval, but the map does go to TRPA for signature. I just wanted to clarify that for everyone. Okay.
David?
Yeah, I just want to make comment about this. This was originally part of the RDA2 up at the lake, and it is no longer. It was dissolved by the public in a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other questions? Okay, since this is for possible action, I'd like to open public comment. Oh, wait a minute, Ellie. Applicant first. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Andrew Strain. I'm with the Beach Club Project Development Team. I've been with the team since 2018. Many of the things that Lucille reported on, the history of the project predate me, but I'll do my best to answer those questions. We're fortunate that we've had a great continuity of the community development staff here over the long haul of the project. It is a phased project, and Lucille is absolutely right that we are here today to ask for your recommendation to approve the airspace condominium map for the 6 buildings, 8 units in each building. They're under construction now, and we plan to start finishing them and turning them over to the new buyers in the middle of the summer. That'll take about 16 months probably to finish all of them. Each building's under a little different stage of construction. We concur with the staff's report, with the staff recommendation, and that includes the conditions of approval that they have offered to you to recommend on to the Board of County Commissioners. And Lucille is absolutely right. She and I have worked together for a number of years now on the design review applications and approvals for Phase 2, which is before us. Phase 3 is also approved. We're in the middle of pulling the building permits for the Phase 3. That's the final phase, 6 more buildings, 48 units also, just like Phase 2. They're very similar in nature and density and layout. And we are here today to ask for your recommendation on the airspace condominium map. That's all that's before you today. Those physical design review issues of building height, parking, building design, landscaping, drainage, those are done. Those have already been approved, and we're in the middle of constructing them. And I've heard from many folks on all sides of the project who want to simply see the project finished. And this is an important step to help us finish that project. And we'd like to ask for your recommendation to approve that onto the Board of County Commissioners. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Madam
Are there
Chair.
questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now I will open it for public comment.
Ellie Waller for the record. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm new to this project because I'm new to this area. I'm sorry I missed design review, and no disrespect to design review, but I do believe that if there are some parking changes, the tentative map could be affected because there isn't enough property through Phase 2 and Phase 3 as stated by Mr. Schneider and 7 other comments today or that were received as supplemental. There is some huge concerns about the appropriateness of approval based on the inadequacy of the parking based on changes due to water issues. I was really concerned on the September 23rd, 2022 minor modification to the subdivision map, which was recorded. During the construction of Phase 1, the development was plagued with a higher than anticipated water table. This resulted in major changes in engineering and design of the subsequent phases. It was also identified by the applicant that a new trend in lifestyle added to the decision for the design change. Can staff elaborate on minor versus major at some point, because I think it's applicable? And why was the minor modification determined for a major change? And I really don't know how a lifestyle trend has anything to do with except maybe the design. Also, just for future, I am very familiar, I've spent 20 years before TRP, I'm very familiar with their process, and there is mapping all throughout this, and there's a private beach identified. I think in the future, at least for the Board of County Commissioners, we need to have where the high water mark is identified so the public understands that all beachfront property is accessible per the TRPA requirements. It just depends on where the high water mark is delineated. And I've been before TRPA several times to ask them to make that a requirement of all developments around the Tahoe Basin. Again, there is some consternation here that you need to take into consideration, and I'm sure you guys all read. So with the changes to the parking, now parking is the issue. And again, I think before this gets to the Board of County Commissioners, there needs to be some remedy based on the questions of there's 35 spaces, but 120 paying club members, which I don't know how that didn't get analyzed in the original project going forward as adequacy of parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Seeing no one else rise for public comment, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Lucille, do you have anything you want to address from Ellie's comments? No, and from what I read, all these issues were taken care of and addressed back in 2022 and previous with regards to drainage, and the parking issue was long settled. And I don't know what else to say about those. Reading the packet information, it was very thorough. Cynthia, do you have anything, Tom?
Tom Delaire, for the record, Community Development Director. Well, a couple of things. The high water mark is set by the state of Nevada at a certain elevation. I was trying to look that up and I don't have that. Okay. The parking requirements for the beach club was based on square footage in a report to TRPA in, I believe, 2011 and was modified in 2016-ish, around 2016. In that modification, the original approval in 2011 from TRPA was 270 parking spaces for the residents. In 2016, it went to 318, as far as I could tell. The clubhouse was reduced, and the assembly area, which I think is really small now, was large enough for 200 people at one point, and those 76 parking stalls that were in the EIA or EIS was removed from the requirement. So they did construct in that with the beach club, they constructed 34 parking spaces, which accommodates for the bar, the restaurant, and the athletic club areas. That facility now has a place for the residents to use as like a vacation spot for their guests that they can live in that area. I don't remember if there was it's like a small meeting room, I think is what they have converted it to, that assembly area. And so the 34 parking spaces are included on the actual clubhouse property. There's 364 parking spots now in that table that we've been using since 2016, and Phase 1 provided 126 of those parking stalls. And so you have 46 units. You need 104 parking stalls for that, and that gives you an additional 22 to use for the next phase, which is this one, Phase 2. We have 48 units being proposed. We need 108. My count was 92 provided. I'm not sure where the 35 came from in the letter, but have to look into that. But so plus the 22 gives you 114, 6 more than we need. Phase 3, my count shows 49 units. It's 48 or 49. So you're going to be a unit short when you're all said and done. Oh, look at that. We're going to lose 2.5 more. Yeah. Anyway, 110 spaces in Phase 3, and they're providing 112. So, so that's our summary of what the parking's required. We have the required 364 spaces. They're actually going to be 1 unit short when it's all said and done, and I didn't know that until just now. So, thank you.
So as long as they're meeting code, that's it?
Lucille may
Lucille.
have.
I believe, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe someone had purchased 2 units and turned it into 1. That is why they are 1 unit less. But the approval was for 143.
Thank you.
And that was on Tom Delaire for record. That was in Phase 1, right, in the first building, in the first phase.
Bryce?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I always appreciate and enjoy the fact that Ms. Waller shows up as a community activist and somebody who cares deeply about our community and its citizens. And the fact that the point was raised about the number of supplemental information that we received regarding the parking. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I can speak for the history and what this body has done since I've been on the Planning Commission, and the amount of time that we spend researching the issues and understanding kind of what's behind the scenes. And so, speaking for myself, there was a tremendous amount of time spent making sure that we understood the parking issue, that I understood the parking issue. And I take all public comment seriously. These are citizens of our county, and their concerns deserve to be heard and understood. And I was going to address my position on that, but I think Mr. Dallaire did it much better than I did. So I just want that to be known and on the record that that is taken into consideration. Public comment for me is always taken into consideration. So thank you.
Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with you, Bryce. I looked very carefully at the public comments and did additional research after I reviewed those last night. I consulted with the District Attorney's Office. I had previously consulted with Lucille on a number of issues as well that have all been adequately voiced here. I think it's important to note that this is a gated community. They are private roads. The law enforcement does not enforce parking within gated communities. That all comes under the jurisdiction of the HOA as far as setting the rules. I think in this particular case, it's somewhat unfortunate, but it comes with the nature of HOAs that the HOA is controlled by the developer until 75% of the units are sold. So in this particular instance, the developer made decisions. The individual homeowners may have agreed with those decisions, may have not agreed with those decisions, but the decisions were made on behalf of the homeowners association to allocate parking in certain fashions, to assign or have signage for parking for certain segments of the community, whether they be members of the beach club, I guess that's what it's called, or actual homeowners in the beach club development. So I do, as Bryce said, take those concerns very seriously. I think in this instance, though, it's not something that the Planning Commission can adjudicate. Unfortunately, as we know from many other instances with HOAs, if individual homeowners have a disagreement with the HOA, that's between the homeowner and the HOA. So I think Lucille has well stated the facts and circumstances and the findings that need to be met. And Tom has articulated the information related to parking that should make us confident that we are upholding what the county code is. So I feel very comfortable with the way this is transpired. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? David?
Yeah, I think situation is that Title 20 says what we have to have. I hope we get into looking at Title 20 in the next year and perhaps change some of those numbers, because I do think we have a problem in some areas in the county with parking. And so I think we need to take a good look at that in the future. Thank you.
I agree. Parking is something we've talked about for, well, at least 4 years that I've been paying attention very closely. And we wanted to bump that number up to at least 2.5, not 2.25. And yes, HOAs are a sticking point, and the public doesn't understand that we have no control over those, or the county doesn't. They don't interfere. Question for the district attorney. When we take a vote, with Paul being absent, would he be counted as being recused or being absent?
Cynthia Gregory from the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. So he has abstained. So this board is now a board of 6 members rather than 7. And so you can put on the record he abstained, but it will still take 4 votes for action.
Okay, thank you. If anyone chooses to vote against this action, the findings are on page 54 and 55 of the packet. And if you choose to vote nay, would you please state your reason why and which finding you disagree with? Do we have a motion if there's no further discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Lucille, could you put the motion up?
I have the recommendation here. Is that what you want? Or back to the top? Wait, do I have that? Sorry.
Kirk, you get to craft.
I'll read it off page 47, Madam Chair. Madam Chairman, I move to recommend conditional approval to the Board of County Commissioners of Land Division application DP 22-0224 for Tahoe Beach Club based on the discussion, ability to make the required findings as outlined in the staff report, and subject to the recommended conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And Paul is absent. Is that clear? Thank you all. Paul abstained. Okay, she got it. Okay. We will go get him. Does anyone need a break?
Go ahead.
No? We're good? For possible act, or for discussion only, item 3 on page 130 of our packets, a discussion and review of Douglas County Planning Commission bylaws by the 2023 Planning Commission members. I requested this to be put on the agenda because I think it's good for the Planning Commission to review them. And I wanted our newest member to have an opportunity to put his 2 cents in on the bylaws after he got a chance to take a look at them. Plus, I've been watching the county commissioners go through their norms and procedures and had a couple of suggestions in looking through ours again. I know the last couple of years I've been making amendments to our bylaws. And I thought that we might want to tighten up ours with regards to putting items on our agenda, and also with regards to the Planning Commission members representing themselves in public. But first, I will let other planning commissioners, if they have something to say, go first. Are there any comments from planning commissioners? Paul?
Thank you. Madam Chair, the significant one that I've found, and it has been explained to me in terms of practice and procedures in the past, is the contact. It would be ex parte contact with an applicant or someone who's against a particular application, such that no individual planning commissioner gets more or less, as the case may be, information about a given matter on the agenda. I think that's appropriate and proper. I initially read it and said to myself, why can't a commissioner talk with an applicant and get, for example, a tour, get the side of that has the burden of proof to explain his or herself, and on the other hand, why not allow someone who is adamantly opposed to a given application to explain their circumstances in more than 3 minutes. However, that aside, I think that the danger of not communicating or not of having information that the other planning commissioners will not have the benefit of, I think it outweighs. So I like the proscription that's in the rules now to advise against such ex parte contacts. That's the way I came out.
So that comes on page 135 of our packet under 4.2, communication outside of public hearing or meetings.
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have a suggestion of language?
No, not really, because it says should. The only thing I might do is sharpen it a bit and say it is not advised, or something to that effect. So it's not proscribed. You're not saying under the First Amendment you can't talk to people about a given thing. It's just that for purposes of the Planning Commission, you should not. Because it puts other planners, not Planning Commission members, potentially at a disadvantage with less information.
Cynthia, do you have?
So Cynthia Gregory from the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. I think the Planning Commission has a good set of bylaws that covers a lot of areas, and in some respects, I think, it works for the purposes of the Planning Commission, almost better than the board norms and procedures do. And so, I think this hasn't been an issue before because it says it should avoid. It's up to you. It's your bylaws. It's your regulations. I think the message is loud and clear. However, if you want to change the language, that's fine. But to my knowledge, that hasn't been a particular issue. And these are your bylaws. So, you can put different language in, but then the question becomes what happens if somebody violates it? So I think it's more of a suggestion as to, hey, this is how we run our meetings and this is the decorum we expect. But it's up to you ultimately.
David?
Yeah, I think from my point of view that I wouldn't change this. I think that as planning commissioners, if we do meet with anyone, we should bring that back to the board in a public meeting and discuss what we heard. That way the public knows the whole story. So that would be my point.
Thank you. I agree. I think that meeting with an applicant is inappropriate, but meeting with the general public is not. Because the applicant may give, for me, this is my opinion, an applicant may give facts or try to persuade. And if it was two commissioners, that's different because then you have a witness and they can't say, well, you said this. Because then you've got the other one that said, no, you didn't say that. But if it's meeting with the public, it's different. Even though you should still be two, I think, just for protection. But if it's an applicant, then it's better just to say, no, the whole commission needs to hear it at the same time. That's evidence, and it's important that we all hear the same thing. That's my opinion. Any others? Are there any comments on any other portions of the bylaws? Kirk?
Madam Chair, I don't have any specific comments on individual portions, but I think you raised a number of good points. And I think the proper process is, as you suggested, we have a discussion at this point now. If there are interest in changing the bylaws, that individuals can bring it to the attention of the chair. And if the chair feels necessary, the chair can agendize this for a future meeting at which we can take possible action.
The two things that I was thinking on, and some of this is related to the last year on the Planning Commission and our issues with our last planning commissioners who spent a lot of time speaking before the Board of Commissioners and also with my place on SLUPAC, which is a state land use planning advisory council, and also being chair of the planning commissioner. Sometimes I appear before the Board of Commissioners. And it's important that when I speak before the Board of Commissioners, to let them know what hat I am wearing and announce to them why I'm here before you as the chair of the Planning Commission, to let you know what we've done as the Planning Commission or as your representative on SLUPAC. I need to let them know, or I'm speaking as an individual regarding this issue. And Mr. Slade would a lot of times speak on issues, but sometimes he would remember to say, I'm speaking as an individual, or sometimes he would cross the line and speak to an issue that would either be coming to the Planning Commission or had been to the Planning Commission and would forget to say, I'm speaking as an individual, which crosses that ethical line or dances on that line. And it says on 4.3, which is on page 136, representations in public, unless specifically directed by the chair to be a representative of the Planning Commission, members should resist speaking on the Planning Commission's behalf. And I wanted to see how you felt about tightening that up to say, instead of should resist speaking on the Planning Commission's behalf, to saying members shall announce or something along that line that they are speaking as an individual. Because I feel it's very important that they announce that they are speaking as an individual, because it's too easy to cross that line. It protects them and it protects the Planning Commission. So I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Madam Chairman, I think that's a very good point, and I think perhaps some additional language would be necessary in that issue.
Others? Bryce?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur that I think it's worthy of a conversation. I'm always a little hesitant to get into wordsmithing with particular with bylaws and such, as I'll leave that to those who went a little further in their secondary education than I did. So I'm open to the conversation, but I think we should be cautious about it.
Others? Ken, David, Paul, Mark, Cynthia?
I would just, Cynthia Gregory from the District Attorney's Office. I would just indicate, I think in the prior sentence it says an individual planning commissioner or at public and private functions at which a planning commissioner is present as an individual, each planning commissioner shall be careful to indicate when he or she is representing the planning commission or acting as a private citizen. So, I mean, there is some of that language there, and I think it naturally flows into the next sentence. I think the question becomes, do you think that the change in language would drive the outcome you're seeking, whereas every time somebody does that, announces it? I think that's the
yeah.
question because it's here.
Yeah, and I guess I guess I just wanted to bring it up. As you said before, what are we willing to do about it? Because I had a conversation a couple of times with Mr. Slade. Mr. Taylor had a conversation with him a couple of times. Chairman Gardner had a conversation with him, and it did not change the behavior. And it's just ingrained behavior, it's habit. And we all have our habits. And I know there was no malintent. It was just the way it was. And I know that I fall into my habits, and I guess I'm just thinking ahead to the future because it only takes one to, as generations change, for things to get really chaotic. And I'm just thinking ahead. So I wanted to have the discussion. I think it's important that we talk about these things from time to time. And that's mostly where I'm coming from. It's the same with the conversation on the agenda on 134, 3.7.1, because it says any individual planning commissioner may request relevant topics be placed on the agenda, provided that the request is timely. At the chair's discretion, the topic may be postponed, but no later than the next regular meeting of the planning commission. We've never acted on that. The only one who really requested that any item be placed on the agenda was Nick Mayer. And it's not always possible to put things on the agenda because the chair doesn't really set the agenda. It's all depending on what's going on, and the community development staff knows what's going on. So I don't know if this language needs to be, the things need to be submitted to the chair, who meets with the community development staff. And then the no later than the next regular meeting, if that language needs to be changed, because we really have no control of the timing, because it depends on the length of the meeting and how much stuff we have and what kind of item they want, because there may need to be a lot of research done in order to fulfill the request of the planning commissioner. You know what I'm trying to get across?
So Cynthia Gregory again from the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. So I think I'm not familiar with the instance that you're raising that happened, but it's a topic. So if it requires a lot of research, it would seem to me that it would have to come back before this board for an action item to give some sort of, direction. Yes, we want further to look into this before that all of that research goes into it, because it's not just one commissioner that directs, it's all 7. So that's kind of my thought on that, is if it's a topic, and it may be depending on how it's framed. But certainly hopefully wouldn't want to see a lot of research or time put into something until it's the entire board said, yes, that's something we want to do. But I understand about with regards to the chair's discretion and how the agenda is currently set amongst the community development and the director. So, yeah, I think that can be clarified, definitely.
Are there any thoughts from other commissioners on that? Could you bring back some language to clean that up, please?
So we can put an item on for action with regards to the bylaws. And so in particular, this one, and if you wouldn't mind, the other 2, I didn't hear any specific direction. So this is the one that will come back unless I hear something differently.
I think this one is more important than anything else. The others, I mostly wanted direction or discussion from the commission.
Okay. All
Madam
right.
Chair,
Paul?
did you want to strengthen the it's not inability, but the fact that we should not be talking to applicants and yet distinguish that from speaking with the public in our bylaws?
I think it says that.
I don't think it makes that distinction, but I think if a member of the public is speaking to you on an item, they're trying to persuade you arguably just as much as an applicant is. And so I think in both instances, you have to decide as an individual planning commissioner to ask yourselves, the questions, is this fact? Are there facts that back it up? How you want to approach that. But I think both sides probably have some sort of persuading they're trying to do.
Do you want it to come back?
No, with that explanation, which is frankly my inclination, it is folks trying to convince us outside of the process. I think that we have, as I indicated in my first comments, we have the ability to ask staff about questions or concerns that we may have either on the applicant side or those that are opposed. And I'm comfortable with that process after I thought it through and initially saw it. It's because in my prior life, there was a set of rules that allowed ex parte communications. And so that's what I was used to. And I think that this rule's probably better when I think about my past experience.
You had a prior life?
As you can see by looking at me, it looks like I've had about 8. So I'm on my 9th life.
Thou art a cat. Anything else? Thank you for having your patience to go over the bylaws again. Thank you, Cynthia. And now we will go into item number 4, which is under public hearings, but the title is for discussion only. A discussion by each of the Planning Commission members on goals and priorities for 2023. And Tom and planning staff were kind enough to provide us with the goals and action items for the master plan from the last year. And I went through and saw a couple of things. And I think Tom and Kate have a couple of things they want to present for us. If nobody has any questions right off the bat, we'll let them give their short presentation and then we can ask them questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Kate Morales O'Neill, Community Development Planning Division. We don't actually have a presentation per se, but while you're discussing your goals and priorities and looking at the implementation section of the master plan, you'll see that we kind of did an additional status column so you could kind of see where we are. So we're just kind of here for support. If you had any specific questions on ones that we didn't give an explanation, those are ones that we could actually hopefully answer for you or where we are in the status of that particular action.
Who wants to go first? Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the sake of being redundant, my goal for this year is what it has been over the prior 2 years, and that is to continue to assist and to be a resource in within my purview as a planning commissioner to assist the planning department in completing or continuing progress, especially as it pertains to the priority goals within the master plan in 2023. We are, as was mentioned earlier, we're 3 years now, coming on 3 years, 3 years since the master plan was redone, and there's a number of these that are in progress, and I think, as we've mentioned before, staff, the county is understaffed, and I think that this community development as a whole and the planning department specifically have done an incredible job to this point, and I just want to continue to be a resource and assist them wherever I can to accomplish the goals that we've set forth.
Thank you. Kirk?
Madam Chairman, I want to echo Bryce's comments about the staff doing such a wonderful job in preparing this report and on making progress on so many of the items. I think they're to be commended. I know they work with the other staff in the county, and they're somewhat limited in what they can do on issues that are not in the community development's bailiwick, but I think you've done an excellent job. If I could comment on just a couple of the items. On the economic development action items 3 and 4, the South Shore Area Plan and the Tahoe Douglas Area Plan. Correct me, Kate or Tom, if I'm off base on this, but I believe that you continue to pursue that, but it is a question of resources and staffing. We can attempt to get contractors to move forward on some of those items, but it's very difficult to find the right type of people, either internally or externally, that can devote the time to make progress on those two plans, which are woefully out of date, and I'm sure Ellie would agree with me on that. So that continues to be a priority of mine. I also want to note on economic development action items 19 and 20. These are two relatively minor items, and you indicate that progress has been made on a couple of those in the Tahoe area specifically. I would hope that the staff could still work through the appropriate county staff to continue to work on those and not expect that just the small progress that has been made in Tahoe is enough. We need to do more in the valley as well on those two items of economic development. And then lastly, I would note that the master plan on the last page, back at page 159, or I guess this is page, 159 is page 323 of the master plan, does discuss that the Planning Commission has a requirement under NRS to make annual reports on the master plan, and I hope that we can agendize that at some point so that the sufficient report can be given and forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners as NRS requires and as we have done in the past. But overall, I think you've done an outstanding job, and I appreciate the work you've done and look forward to working with you in the coming year.
David?
Yeah, I just give a little bit of background and where I'm coming from. I was moved to California from Washington State in 1953 to the Riverside area. I don't know how many of you know, but Riverside, California was voted one of the 10 most beautiful cities in the United States, top 10 in 1953. We all know what's happened to Riverside since then. When I tell people I used to live in Riverside, they say, oh, that's too bad. You know, it's not a good thing that you came from Riverside at this point. But when I moved to Douglas County 20 years ago, I saw what reminded me of my youth in Riverside. There was a lot of agriculture in Riverside in 1953. The original navel orange tree was planted in Riverside. So agriculture was very important. There were orange trees almost everywhere. Any place where there wasn't housing, there was orange trees. Those are totally gone today. There's hardly any orange groves that are producing crops for agriculture. It's all housing, as far as you can see. A lot of small lot houses, I might add. And that's one thing. If the public wants to keep Douglas County rural as possible, I think our Title 20 should be changed somewhat to eliminate 16 parcels per acre. I think that's way too much density for a rural community. Maybe if it's multifamily, maybe that's okay. But if it's single-family residence, 5,000 square foot lots are much too small. That's more like Newport Beach, California. where you have 50 by 100 lots all over the place because the land is so valuable. Our land is getting valuable, but it's nowhere near what it is in Newport Beach. So I think that we should take a look at that if we're redoing Title 20. The other thing is keeping rural. We know that that's part of our master plan, to keep Douglas County rural. And I can tell you from the 20 years I've been here, most of the people that live here now, a lot of people say, well, you're just trying to keep others out. Well, maybe that's true, but if you don't keep others out, you're not going to have what you have now. It's going to change dramatically. And so I would like to see us try to maintain that rural feeling that we have as much as possible. It may not be as possible as I would like it, but as much as we can as a group, keep the rural character. We need to get the master plan and Title 20 in sync so that there's no conflict between the two. I think we have some conflicts in it now, and I know you're working to take care of that. But I would like to have that be with the intent, once again, to keep us rural. That's my wish and what I will be working for as a member of this commission.
Thank you, David. Mark?
Yes, so my goal is to have Title 20 updated, and in particular, I'm very interested in the Transfer of Development Rights Program. As Dave said, right now, the agricultural landowner is rewarded to sell a 20-acre parcel economically, substantially more than he could ever make off of a TDR, and in fact, there hasn't been a TDR transaction in this county in many, many years. I do have a question for you and Tom. Assuming you bring Title 20 to us, will you bring it in pieces, or will you be bringing it as one lump sum?
Tom Delaire, Community Development, for the record. We're hoping to bring it to you in pieces, actually. I would like to just get it written and get it to you, but it's a kind of a process, and we still have these things called applications that we got to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and questions and problems with current development. And so we believe the plan is to bring it to you in chunks and sections, and then hopefully the plan right now is to maybe have a couple of planning commission sessions where we actually talk about a subject like parking, the TDR section, of course. Once we get the scope of work out and developed and hire a consultant for that, then we can get together as a group or part of a planning commission meeting and discuss it under an item under this meeting. So that's kind of what we're hoping. We got to come up with a plan, and we'll get that presented to you guys.
Thank you, Tom.
Paul?
Count me in on that meeting. One of my first priority as I looked through all of the very helpful guide that was given to us called implementation, the agriculture conservation, particularly several of the land use and items, and with more particularly public facilities, services, recreation, and growth management and housing. I do want to help, as Mark and Dave discussed, with revisions to the 900-page Title 20 Consolidated Development Code. I'm not afraid of reading. That's what I did all my life, and I'm ready to get started. So to the extent that you wish preliminary reviews of sections, I am making myself available to planning staff. I do need to tell you that I have concerns about some of the conditions of approval because I have read through the pertinent Nevada revised statutes, and I think one of the important things is to ensure that any development, even the issues that come up, and there are other issues that come up like well, for example, BHRs, that the NRS says it's important to maintain the character of the existing particular neighborhood. And that is consistent with the planning, as you gave in the presentation, as staff just gave us in the presentation. And that's very important for neighborhoods, and it's very important for good planning. So with respect to the development plan, the master plan, I think that they also should be consistent with Title 20, so changes can eliminate certain conflicts, as was just pointed out by Commissioner Nelson. To start off, I'm in the process of reading that since you called it to my attention. And it is daunting, but it's doable, as they say in other circles. Now, with respect to ensuring development and the character of neighborhoods, and that any changes fit and are consistent with what we see in neighborhoods, my first act, after I had a briefing on zoning, water wells, and development, reserve zones, I am going to take a 2 to 3 day tour of the entire county upon myself, and in part, hopefully with staff and Tom, our director, to see these things up close, personal, and have personal knowledge of what the heck I'm talking about when I start working on Title 20. I'm very familiar with the Tahoe, and I'm familiar with the west side, Genoa, the historic district, and down Jacks Road. But I'm very anxious to get the character of all of the neighborhoods and then utilize those perceptions and recognition in making a Title 20 a document in the Development Code, a document that satisfies all of our ultimate goals as reflected in the master plan. That's it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Paul. Ken?
I want to thank Kate and Tom for their great work in putting these documents together. And I want to reiterate what Dave said about the valley and how important it is to keep it rural. And one thing that did perk me underneath the master plan, under economic development, number 16, help to explore tools to connect local consumers to local suppliers. And so I think that's really important for the valley, because after that snowstorm in last year in December, and seeing the shelves of all the stores just literally disappear, I just think that this valley needs to have its own infrastructure and not rely so much on California.
Great point. Any other comments? My turn. One, I want to go on that tour. And I put some thought into this. One, I noticed that we have a lot of comments under land use and ag and conservation and public safety about open space. We really wanted to cover it, that we had open space. So I think that's a theme that we're going to hear a lot of. And I noticed that under Ag and Conservation on page 145, Action 1, investigate creating an open space land trust to facilitate planning and implementation of an open space acquisition program. I think we can take that out. That's something that's better done in the private sector. I don't think the county should be doing that. It could be a public-private partnership, but it's really not something that the county should be doing. And then with regards to keeping the valley rural, we've tried 3 times to get a 1/4 cent tax passed, and it has not passed. People say they want to keep it rural. Well, we can do only so much, and then TDRs will do so much, but people are going to have to pay for the privilege. And if they can't eke out a quarter of a cent, we're going to lose it. We are going to lose it. And it's a sad thing to say, but it's a fact. Because the only places that have effective open space programs are the ones that are the people who live there are willing to pay for it. And then on page 159, Action 11 under Public Safety, it says, study the areas developed by serial land parceling. And it's not started, it's a priority 3 to 5. And under the Planning 101, under tentative parcel maps, it talks about, under administrative hearings, it goes to parcels that are under 4. And when I look at the agendas for administrative hearings, they go in parcels. You'll see 200 acres that are split into 50 acres, and then those 50 acres will go in and they're split. And then they go into 20 acres and they're split. And to me, that's serial parceling, because then they go into 5 acres and then they're consecutively sold. To me, that's serial parceling. So that's something that needs to get looked at, whether that comes under Title 20 or it needs to be an ordinance or something, but that's something that needs to be looked at, and that's one of my priorities for 2023. And echoing the sentiments of the others, it's keeping the valley rural, keeping it self-sustaining, looking at Title 20. We're all very excited about Title 20. I was wondering if looking at Title 20 in pieces, excellent idea, and maybe we separate out design review from Title 20 and have 2 separate documents. Maybe that's the way to go, to thin it down. Suggestion. I don't know, you're the bosses, you're the keepers of Title 20. We're the keepers or the custodians and you're the keepers, whatever, however the verbiage is, but it's an idea. But I thank you and your staff tremendously for all you've done for the county. Thank you, Cynthia. And if there are no more comments, no more kudos, thank you for the past year. You've done an excellent job as a planning commission. If there's nothing else, I would open it up for public comment. Ellie? Closing public comment. Because we're not taking any action on that item.
Ellie Waller, for the record. I'll use my closing public comment to discuss the priorities that came here. Resounding, keep this rural, how we do that, and keep up with progress and upgrades and new development where it belongs. I still have an issue with one project at North County where I live. Well, we'll go into that project. Its location. And I think we really need to look at the maps again, decide and target development where it's appropriate. I would also like to add to looking at the TDR program, tightening up the cluster development regulation, as I think it is not being translated as it was intended when it was first brought forward. So I think we need to look at cluster development. That's my opinion. I appreciate Bryce looking at the overarching, everything needs to be studied. Kirk, I appreciate you bringing up the South Shore Area Plan. I'm the broken record on all area plans. The ones, or community plans as they're called down here, were in 1997. They're just stale. It's not fair to the communities. It's not fair to staff to have to interpret what was intended 20 years ago. think that needs to be looked at. Dave Nelson, thank you very much. I was born and raised in Southern California in the 60s, and I got to pick oranges from those orange trees. Moved to Tahoe 20 years ago, moved here 3 years ago, transitioning away from the crowdedness and what's going on. Again, some growth is necessary, but as evidenced by the traffic, the accidents, all the things going on the highways, can we keep up with that infrastructure? Thank you, Mark, for the TDRs. We do need to look at that. We need to also tighten that up. I don't think it was intended for a landowner to take something from TRE that wasn't developable and use it on their own ag land somewhere else. Personal opinion. Thank you, Commissioner Bruno. I'm looking forward to how you proceed with everything here. I'm glad you want to take a tour of the county. Again, I'm in North County. I'm familiar there. I want to thank Ken Paxton for also looking at the economics and the suppliers. And Maureen, thank you. The serial parceling is a tough issue and does need to be looked at. And I think with projects that sit on shelves for 20 years need to be revisited. We need to tighten up some language, how those should be revisited. Staff does a great job bringing them forward under the prescribed rules. Want to thank staff. They help me. I try not to bug them too much. Thank you.
Seeing no one else rise for public comment, I will close public comment. And are there any closing comments from the commission? I have a couple of things I'd like to say. 2023 is going to be a very busy year for planning and for the Planning Commission. I know none of us took this assignment lightly. We all knew what we were getting into, I hope. And it's going to take a lot of time this year, a lot of study. And I know sometimes I feel like running into the night, screaming, and never to return. But I come back because I love the county, and I'm very fond of each and every one of you, and I'm fond of the staff. And we do this because it is a labor of love. But if you ever feel that the job is too much and that you want to get off the train, there is no shame in saying, stop, I want to get off. We will all understand. So if it gets too much, we will all understand. So just be advised, it's okay. It's okay, we all understand. And with that, those are my comments. If anybody has any other comments, if not, I will close this meeting, and it is 2:55. Record time. Thank you all. See you in March.